Some children don't grow up. They disappear, not because they want to, but because the people who were supposed to see them never did. And the pain of being invisible doesn't fade. It follows them into adulthood, quietly destroying everything they try to build. When a child grows up feeling invisible, their sense of self doesn't disappear all at once. It fades slowly, almost quietly, the way a shadow shrinks when the light moves away. They learn early that the world responds to volume, to presence, to need, but not to theirs, and so they adapt. They shrink themselves to fit the silence around them. They stop asking for attention because they've been taught again and again that nothing will come. And in that silence, something begins to erode inside them. Identity is supposed to be built from reflections, how caregivers look at you, respond to you, guide you, comfort you, encourage you. For invisible kids, those mirrors never form. No one reflects their emotions back. No one tells them, "I see you." Instead, their feelings drift in an empty space, unanswered. And over time, the child starts to believe a dangerous idea: maybe my feelings don't count. At first, it's just a coping strategy, but eventually it becomes a belief, a truth, a fixed lens they see themselves through. They start to doubt their own emotional signals. They second-guess every reaction. They begin to ask themselves questions children should never be forced to ask. Do I matter? Is something wrong with me? Why can everyone look past me so easily? And because these questions never receive real answers, they create an internal confusion that hardens into a kind of lifelong fog, a fog where identity should have been. As they grow older, they try to construct a sense of self from whatever fragments they can find: other people's expectations, other people's moods, other people's needs. They become who others need them to be, not who they truly are. And at first, this seems like a workable survival strategy. They get approval, they get acceptance, they get a little peace. But none of it belongs to them. It's all borrowed. Deep down, invisible kids carry a feeling they can't name, a hollow space where confidence should live. They feel like imposters in their own lives. They don't trust their voice, they don't trust their wants, they don't trust their worth. And when they try to assert themselves, something inside freezes. They feel exposed, they feel wrong, they feel like they're stepping into a role they were never meant to play. Because for years, the world taught them one message: you're easier to love when you're quiet. You're easier to handle when you disappear. This is how an identity crisis forms, not as a sudden collapse, but as a lifelong collection of moments where a child learns that being unseen is safer than being acknowledged. They don't develop a stable sense of self, they develop a flexible one that bends for everyone else, one that hides its own needs, one that never fully holds its shape. And the tragedy is, they don't even realize this is happening. To them, it feels normal, natural, expected. They assume everyone feels this way, uncertain, undefined, unsure of who they are. It's only when life demands clarity, confidence, or emotional stability that they begin to feel the weight of the absence inside them. They realize they don't know how to choose for themselves. They don't know what they want. They don't know how to be visible without feeling exposed, anxious, or ashamed. Growing up unseen doesn't just steal a childhood. It steals a person's internal compass. It takes the blueprint of who they might have become and replaces it with silence. And that silence follows them into adulthood, echoing in everything they do. Because when a child grows up invisible, they don't just lose attention. They lose themselves, and they learn to live without a self at all. Kids who grow up feeling invisible don't just learn to stay quiet, they learn to stay alert. Every room becomes a landscape they have to scan, every expression a signal they must decode before it turns into danger. It starts early, long before they can put language to what they're doing. They watch the way their parents breathe, the tension in their shoulders, the subtle shift in a tone of voice. They learn that the safest version of themselves is the one that takes up the least space. Quiet, agreeable, predictable. And so their childhood becomes a study in observation, not expression. They become experts at reading the emotions of everyone around them, even when those same people never bothered to understand theirs. It's a strange kind of survival, caring too much about people who cared too little. But that's what invisible kids do. They learn to prevent problems before they happen. They adapt, anticipate, absorb. They bend themselves into shapes that will stir the least amount of irritation, disappointment, or rejection. The tragedy is that this hyper-awareness feels like responsibility. They believe it's their job to keep the peace, to avoid triggering emotional storms, to maintain the illusion that everything is fine. They become children who aren't allowed to be children, and while other kids are learning to play, to speak up, to explore, invisible kids are learning to monitor the emotional climate like tiny, exhausted weather forecasters. They carry this skill into adulthood, but by then, it no longer looks like survival. It looks like anxiety. It looks like overthinking. It looks like constantly decoding people's faces, tones, pauses, silences. They analyze conversations long after they're over, searching for signs of disapproval they might have missed. They replay their own words, wondering if they said too much, sounded too eager, took up more space than they should have. That childhood reflex becomes a lifetime habit. Anticipate everything, trust nothing, stay small. Their nervous system never learned what calm feels like. Instead, it learned vigilance. It learned that one wrong move could change the energy in the room. It learned that the safest way to exist was to always be prepared. And when you grow up this way, stillness feels suspicious, quiet feels dangerous. Even moments of peace feel like the build-up to something bad. The body doesn't know how to relax because it never had permission to. Invisible kids become adults who apologize for things they didn't even do. They feel responsible for other people's emotions, carrying guilt that isn't theirs. They take blame to avoid conflict. They offer comfort before anyone asks. They soften their voice, they hide their needs, and they convince themselves that this is kindness, compassion, empathy, when really, it's fear. It's the fear that if they stop paying attention for even a moment, they'll lose whatever fragile safety they've created. And underneath all that vigilance is exhaustion, a deep, quiet, private exhaustion that no one sees because they're too good at pretending everything is fine. They've been pretending since childhood, pretending to be okay, pretending not to need anything, pretending that reading everyone's emotions is normal, harmless, easy. But the truth is, they're tired of watching, tired of absorbing, tired of being responsible for feelings that aren't theirs, tired of living on emotional guard duty. And the saddest part is that they don't even realize this exhaustion is unnatural. It's all they've ever known. Being hyper-aware feels like breathing. It feels like the cost of existing. It feels like the only way to stay safe. Because when a child grows up invisible, they don't learn to trust the world. They learn to fear every moment of it. Kids who grow up feeling invisible don't just struggle to be seen. They struggle to take up space at all. It's not that they don't want to speak. It's that somewhere along the way, they learned speaking comes with consequences. Maybe it brought irritation. Maybe it brought dismissal. Maybe it brought nothing at all. And that nothingness hurt more than any harsh reaction could. So they learned a quiet lesson. Staying small keeps you safe. As they grow, this lesson doesn't fade. It sinks in deeper. It shapes how they enter a room, how they sit, how they breathe. They shrink themselves without realizing they're doing it. They soften their footsteps. They fold their shoulders. They silence their instinct to say what they really think. They convince themselves they're easygoing or low maintenance. But the truth is darker. They just don't believe their needs hold weight. Invisible kids don't ask for help, not because they don't need it, but because they don't think they deserve it. They feel like burdens. They feel like interruptions. They feel like speaking up might inconvenience someone, and the guilt of that feels unbearable. So they swallow their needs and call it strength. They endure discomfort and call it independence. They settle for less and call it humility. But deep down, it's not any of those things. It's fear, a fear conditioned into them long before they had the words to describe it. By the time they reach adulthood, this fear has woven itself into everything they do. They hesitate before sharing ideas, even good ones. They apologize before expressing a simple preference. They say it's okay even when it isn't. They become the person who says whatever works for you so often that they forget what works for them. Choice feels like pressure. Visibility feels like risk. Attention feels like danger. They've been conditioned to believe that the world responds better to their silence than their presence. They enter conversations trying not to take up too much emotional space. They choose seats near the edges of rooms. They avoid confrontation even when it's necessary. They minimize their accomplishments, deflect compliments, and hide their talents because something inside them whispers that being too visible might invite rejection. And it doesn't matter how capable they are, how intelligent they are, how much potential they carry. Their internal voice, the one shaped in childhood, keeps reminding them that existing loudly is not for them, that confidence is for other people, that belonging is earned through compliance, that worthiness must be proven through silence, not expressed through presence. The saddest part is how normal this feels to them. They don't see it as fear, they see it as politeness, sensitivity, calmness. But beneath it all is a deep and painful truth. They don't believe the world has room for them. Not really, not fully, not without conditions. They carry an invisible weight, the belief that their presence is something to apologize for. And with every apology, spoken or unspoken, they reinforce the same childhood wound, the wound of being dismissed, overlooked, unheard. It's a wound that follows them into friendships, relationships, careers, a wound that shapes how they love and how they let themselves be loved. They've spent so long learning to occupy as little space as possible that the idea of taking up room, emotionally, mentally, physically, feels almost impossible. It feels unnatural. It feels wrong. Visibility feels like a spotlight they never asked for. So they retreat, they shrink, they disappear just enough to survive, but never enough to truly live. Because when a child grows up believing they shouldn't take space, they carry one silent truth into adulthood. They fade so others can shine. Invisible kids don't grow up without anger. They grow up without permission to feel it, and that changes everything. Anger for most children is a signal. Something is wrong, something needs attention, something hurts. But when a child learns their feelings don't matter, their anger has nowhere to go. It can't come out. It isn't allowed to exist. So it turns inward, curling into the very places that should be filled with confidence and self-worth. At first, the child doesn't even realize this is happening. They just know that expressing frustration leads to nothing. Maybe no one listens. Maybe someone mocks them. Maybe someone punishes them. Maybe someone acts like they're overreacting, dramatic or difficult. Over time, they begin to believe a quiet lie. My anger is the problem, not the neglect, not the dismissal, not the emotional coldness around them. No, the problem must be them. So they suppress it. They swallow it. They bury it under politeness, silence, or compliance. And buried anger doesn't disappear, it mutates. It becomes self-blame. It becomes shame. It becomes a constant internal whisper telling them they're wrong for feeling anything at all. They start to direct the sharpness they can't aim at others back at themselves. As they get older, this inward anger shows up in ways no one recognizes. It looks like perfectionism, pushing themselves to the edge because anything less feels like failure. It looks like self-criticism, tearing themselves apart for mistakes that other people would shrug off. It looks like self-sabotage, ruining opportunities because deep down they don't believe they deserve them. The anger is still there, but it no longer looks like anger. It looks like self-destruction softened into habit. In adulthood, this anger becomes a quiet companion they carry everywhere. It lingers in the background of their relationships, making them tolerate things they shouldn't. It makes them forgive too easily, absorb too much, stay too long. They don't fight for themselves because fighting feels dangerous. They don't assert themselves because asserting feels wrong. They don't walk away because walking away feels like a rebellion they were never allowed to have. And underneath all of that is a pressure they can't name. A heavy, aching buildup of all the moments they wished someone would have defended them, protected them, or simply acknowledged their pain. They carry those unspoken moments like old wounds that never healed properly. And sometimes, when life pushes them too hard, they feel that buried anger rise. But instead of letting it out, they push it back down, scared of what it might do, scared of how people might react, scared of becoming the very thing they were told to never be, too much. Invisible kids turn into adults who apologize for feeling hurt. They apologize for having boundaries. They apologize for needing rest. They apologize for expressing even the smallest frustration. Their instinct isn't to say, "That upset me." Their instinct is to say, "It's fine, I'm fine." Even when they're breaking inside, even when the anger is eating at them silently. What makes this so tragic is that the world sees them as calm, gentle, easygoing, never knowing these qualities were born out of emotional suppression, not serenity. They walk through life with a softness that was shaped by fear, not nature. And that softness makes them easy to overlook, easy to take advantage of, easy to misunderstand. But the truth is darker. They're not calm. They're controlled. They had to be. And that control cost them the ability to release their pain in healthy ways. So it stays inside them, heavy and unspoken. Because when a child grows up unseen, their rage never disappears. It simply learns to hide in their silence. They grow up learning to vanish so others can stay comfortable. They grow up mastering silence, carrying wounds no one ever bothered to notice. And by the time they finally realize what was stolen from them, they've spent years living in the shadows of their own life. But the truth is simple, brutal and undeniable. No child survives invisibility without scars.